Typhoon YouTube passed through the Northern Mariana Islands this morning, leaving a path of destruction behind. Officials say the U.S. Commonwealth could be without running water for months. The typhoon had maximum sustained winds of 180 miles per hour. It is the strongest typhoon to pass over the islands.
The Commonwealth delegate to the U.S. Congress said the island will need significant help with recovery. Nestor Lecanto from our affiliate in Guam, KUAM, has more.
Parts of the Saipan Airport were heavily damaged by the storm. Commonwealth Ports Deputy Director Bill Camacho says flight activity has been suspended until further notice, and there is no timeline yet for reopening as they are still making assessments. Power poles were toppled throughout the island. No estimates yet for restoration, but vital communication service remains. Jim Olerking is CEO of IT&E, the CNMI's local phone service provider.
We've been able to keep the network up pretty well. Our landline network is entirely buried, and we get power from the central office, so it survives typhoons well.
They're also setting up charging stations at IT&E locations while the power remains out, and the company will continue to coordinate with emergency service providers throughout the recovery effort.
We've been working directly with FEMA, Red Cross, and Homeland Security on different things we could provide them during the typhoon, and also lining up the ongoing support that they're going to need for supporting the community afterwards.
Docomo Pacific also says its mobile network remained operational throughout the storm, and the company is also working toward full restoration. Meanwhile, shipping company Matson will resume weekly service to Saipan Friday morning, departing at 10 a.m. Company Vice President Bernie Valencia says the normal Wednesday departure was delayed by the storm. She says they'll also be carrying relief goods from local charity groups organized by the Ajuda Foundation. Matson is also donating a container of water and ice.
Now, it's feared an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico that's been ongoing for 14 years could become America's worst environmental disaster. It was in 2004 when Hurricane Ivan slammed into Florida's Gulf Coast, severely damaging an offshore drilling operation just off Louisiana. However, the company in charge managed to cover up the incident for a whole 6 years.
Flying over the Gulf of Mexico, a researcher spots oil-coated gas bubbling in a miles-long slick.
People are not the only ones who call the now polluted waters home, and for the indigenous animals there, countless birds and wildlife, the stakes are high, life or death, and time is running low.
I suppose the big difference is that with Deepwater Horizon, there was a big explosion and people got killed, and so it instantly hit headlines. And then a lot of oil was released extremely rapidly. In the case of the Taylor platform, first, the original incident didn't cause any loss of life. It was in the context of a major hurricane, Hurricane Ivan, and both the company and the American regulators managed to keep the entire incident pretty quiet. It's one of those long-running accidents which is less exciting from a reporting point of view, but over the course of 14 years, with as many as 700 barrels a day of oil being leaked into the Gulf, it adds up to being of the same kind of order as that Deepwater Horizon spillage.
Well, back in 2015, the company in question did say that there was no evidence to suggest an ongoing leak or any significant environmental damage. It hasn't given any further explanation since. Journalist Oliver Tickle again says, though, that even routine oil spillage does result in horrifying volumes a year.
The Gulf is currently producing something like 20% of America's oil. There's rather a high rate of accidents. There are fires breaking out every few days. There's a high rate of oil spillage, with routine spillages in the hundreds of thousands of gallons per year just from ordinary operation. And this entire Gulf Coast is highly industrialized, and it is bound to be leaking considerable amounts of oil. And of course, those environmental impacts impact other industries which are also valuable, like tourism and fisheries and shellfish. There's tens of thousands of miles of oil pipelines transecting this entire region. And if you've got a pipeline, then you are bound to have leaks.
Well, the investigation now in full swing as a city and a nation mourns. President Trump today in Indianapolis speaking about the horrific shooting.
This wicked act of mass murder is pure evil, hard to believe, and frankly, something that is unimaginable. Our nation and the world are shocked and stunned by the grief.
Garrett Tinney is live in Pittsburgh with the very latest. Garrett?
Well, Arthel, we've heard several officials now describe this scene as horrific and one of the worst they have ever seen, and we're starting to get a bit of an idea as to why that is. This past hour in a press conference with the FBI, we learned that around 9:55 this morning, Robert Bowers walked into the synagogue, and within minutes, he opened fire on all of those who were worshiping at the time. Now, within minutes, he had killed 11 people, injured 2 others. Officers arrived then just as he was starting to leave the building. He engaged in a gunfight with them, shot 2 of those officers, and then he went back inside. SWAT officers started moving in. He continued to exchange gunfire with them, injuring 2 more SWAT officers before eventually he surrendered with several gunshot wounds of his own. Now, in total, police say he was inside for 20 minutes. And the fact that he was in there that long, they say it is a miracle that this wasn't worse.
This is the most horrific crime scene I've seen in 22 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Had it not been for the quick and heroic response, this would have been much worse.
There were no children killed in this shooting, which is significant because what we had heard from local church leaders was that one of the services taking place this morning at the synagogue was for the naming of a baby. Now, the other 6 who were injured, 2 remain in critical condition. The others are said to be in serious but stable condition. In terms of the investigation, the FBI said it has no knowledge that Bowers was on law enforcement's radar before today. They have already begun digging into every aspect of his life, his residences, his vehicle, his connections socially and familially. And they are also looking into his social media presence as well and his movements over the last few days. And investigators, as they continue to look into that, they say that this is being treated as a hate crime. And that is partly in due part to reports that as he walked into the synagogue that he yelled, "All Jews must die." Now, that is not being confirmed. They said they are looking into those reports as this investigation continues, but that as well as into social media postings that are said to have been attributed to him are in part why they are treating this as a hate crime case at this point. The U.S. attorney said that he expects to file criminal charges shortly, perhaps as soon as today. Tonight, meanwhile, here in this community, they are continuing to mourn the great loss of this incident. There are several vigils being planned at some local synagogues as well as some other churches here in the area to mourn that loss and also to give thanks that, as law enforcement officials said, that this wasn't worse when it very much could have been. They are hoping to release more details about the 11 people who lost their life in this attack tomorrow morning. Arthel and Eric.
All right, Garrett, thank you very much.
Joining me now, Newt Gingrich, former House Speaker and a Fox News contributor. You wrote this piece that calling this an attack on America. Newt, your thoughts on what we just heard from William Lajeunesse, the reporter, and Jorge Ramos on the ground as well?
Well, look, I think it's pretty clear. Use Jorge Ramos's numbers. There are at least 9,000 or 10,000 potential people if you count the ones on the Guatemala border who want to come north. The easy question to ask is this. Let's say we open the border. We welcome all of them. That picture goes out across the whole planet. How big do you think the next convoy is? And then the caravan after that, and the caravan after that. And you get to the question, you're either going to control the border or you're not going to control the border. And as an American, we have the most generous legal immigration system in the world. We have over 1 million people a year legally becoming American, or getting American right to be in America. Most of them go on to become American citizens. So it's just a dishonest lie to suggest that we don't have a serious immigration program that's legal. Now, the problem we have is there are a lot of folks who want to break the law. And if you ever had open borders, as you pointed out, the Gallup World Poll, I think the number for all of Latin America and the Caribbean was 179 million people would like to come to the U.S. That's just unsustainable. So the question becomes, what are you going to do about it? And the president, who has inherited a disastrous immigration system between court orders, bad congressional laws, federal regulation, it's a total disaster. He's trying to get it right. I think it's important to stop this caravan, in part to send a signal to the rest of Latin America, no, you're not going to be allowed to come in, and in part because in the process of stopping it, we're going to learn a lot about the laws that need to be changed. And frankly, Congress, maybe in the lame duck session, ought to be challenged not comprehensive reform, but let's take the 10 dumbest things. Let's just fix one step at a time and begin to make it possible to manage our border.
Yeah. I just want to play this clip from The View today, an animated conversation about this, and get your thoughts. Let's play that.
Is this straight up fear mongering? I mean, when did he start putting the Middle Easterners in?
Are they walking here?
Well, I don't know.
You know what? He makes up everything. He'll tell you Osama bin Laden is marching.
They're referring to the fact that the president suggested that there might be some criminals, and he said that people from unknown Middle Easterners are mixing in. Your reaction to that, Newt?
Well, first of all, the Secretary of Homeland Security said yesterday that we have to recognize there are probably people from the cartels among the 7,000 to 10,000, that there are probably other people who are involved in human trafficking. Remember, a lot of those pictures you saw of a man and a young girl, he wasn't her father. He was the guy bringing her in to sell her into human trafficking. So let's be clear. Most of these people are just folks who'd love to get to the promised land. They'd love to have Christmas. They'd love to have a chance to live like we live. But there is a substantial set of people who are lawbreakers, who are dangerous, who are MS-13 members. And if you were a terrorist and wanted to get in the U.S. and you saw 10,000 people trying to get in the U.S., how unlikely is it that you might decide to join them?
All right, so as the migrant caravan makes its way north right to our southern border, Fox Nation's Tommy Lahren, foxnation.com, that is, hit the streets of Los Angeles asking people what they thought. Take a look.
Can I ask you a question real quick? Are you aware at all of what's going on at our border with the migrant caravan coming in, thousands of people coming from Central America? What do you think?
I think it's a nice place to be at. I can see why a lot of people want to come.
If I was living outside the United States, I would do everything I could to get here.
If you don't stop this caravan, there's going to be more. There's already one building.
I don't think that the entire caravan is filled with bad people and hombres.
We just can't have a bunch of people crash the border. That's insane.
There should be some amnesty granted to them because of the travesties that are occurring in their country.
We take care of the American people first and foremost before we deal with anybody else's countries and their problems.
Do you think we should have a wall on our southern border to stop people from just coming in?
No, there should be no wall.
No, a wall, a barrier is the stupidest possible thing. It doesn't work. Because look at history. Look at the Great Wall of China.
There should be no walls in our planet. It's just wrong. I mean, imagine every country had a wall. How would we ever get around, move around?
Does it make you nervous about who would be coming over here since we really don't know who these people are?
No, because I really don't know who most of the people are that are already here.
God bless America, and every one of you is welcome here. All right, I love you. Peace out.
The border between Bosnia and Croatia has been the scene of yet another episode of violence between migrants and police as hundreds attempted to cross into the EU. Migrants demanding to enter Croatia could be seen getting aggressive with police, who responded by firing tear gas and using batons to disperse the crowds. Several people were left injured in the scuffles. Croatia has become one of Europe's main entry points for migrants hoping to reach wealthier countries such as France and Germany, but Croatia is reluctant to accept EU migrant quotas, creating a stumbling block in talks to resolve the migrant crisis.
And plastic seems to be everywhere, in the environment and even in our food. A new study shows it's even making its way into human waste. RT correspondent Dan Cohen is in the RT America newsroom with these disturbing details. Dan?
That's exactly right, Anya. We use plastic for most everything these days, including eating and drinking, so it's hardly a surprise that scientists are finding it in human waste. A study from the Medical University of Vienna found potentially toxic microplastics make their way through the human gastrointestinal system. Microplastics are pieces of plastic smaller than 5 millimeters, about the size of a sesame seed. The study isn't limited to one country. The researchers monitored participants from Finland, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, Poland, Russia, the UK, and Austria. Each participant was exposed by eating plastic-wrapped food and drinking from plastic bottles. It's the first study of its kind, and it raises serious questions about the impact of microplastics on human health. The study's lead researcher said the results are of particular concern for people with gastrointestinal diseases. He said studies on animals have shown high plastic concentration in the gut, and the smallest particles can enter the bloodstream, lymphatic system, and can even reach the liver. The researchers made special note of seafood. 2 to 5% of all plastic produced ends up in the seas, creating giant accumulations of garbage patches. These plastics are then consumed by sea creatures like tuna, lobster, and shrimp, and eventually make their way into the human food system. But food isn't the only way humans are consuming microplastics. A study in March showed that people who drink just 1 liter of water from a plastic bottle per day could be ingesting tens of thousands of microplastic particles. While that study hasn't been peer-reviewed, it spurred the World Health Organization to study the dangers of drinking water from plastic bottles. So while our use of plastic has clearly harmful effects on the environment, we might be creating a health hazard for ourselves too.
I believe of the start of a new nation. Amen! 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 God bless you. Just take off your hats, please, gentlemen, and stay standing. Follow. You know this one as a Ogenigi. Here we go. Blessing and honor, glory and power be unto the Ancient of Days. Come on. From every nation, all of creation, bow before the Ancient of Days. Come on, every tongue in heaven and earth shall declare your glory. Every knee shall bow at your throne. In worship you will be exalted, O God, and your kingdom shall not pass away, O Ancient of Days.
I want you to hear this very, very clearly, because I believe it's from God. And it's with fear and trembling I bring you this word, sir. In 2 Chronicles chapter 15 and verse 2, the word of God says, the Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But sir, if you forsake him, he will forsake you. I want to say, Excellency, You cannot serve two masters. And I'm getting very emotional. You've either got to implement this book in this nation, or you have to listen to all the voices that are talking to you out there. Mr. Ramaphosa, if you are going to try and please all those voices out there, you are going to fail. You will not succeed. But if you implement the Word of God, and if you can stand up in Parliament and in public meetings and say, "Thus says the Lord," then you will be the next president of South Africa in 2019. The choice is yours. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 12, verse 30, "He who is not for me is against me. He who does not gather with me scatters abroad." Sir, you may not put Jesus on the mantelpiece with all the other gods. He is not an idol. He is alive. He is here. And he wants to help you. But you need to acknowledge it publicly without any discretion. And this country will be truly saved. Thank you, sir. Can you give the Lord a clap, please, ladies and gentlemen? We're now going to pray.
Time now for a special night court. All eyes on newly confirmed Justice Brett Kavanaugh, with key cases now up for a vote. Two of them involving religion in the public square. Now, the first deals with a Washington State high school football coach fired for praying on the field after games. The other case involves a 40-foot cross in Maryland, part of the state's World War I memorial. Now, both ruled by lower courts to be unconstitutional because they can be interpreted as government endorsement of religion. So those courts found. Let's talk about it with tonight's Legal Eagles, senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and Think Progress Justice editor Ian Millhiser, along with former Justice Department official and Supreme Court advocate Tom Dupree. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay, so first of all, for folks who don't know, these cases are now on a list that the justices will all vote on. You have to get 4 votes for the court to say we're going to hear it, and that's pretty rare. So I want to ask you both what you think the odds are of either of these cases or both of them getting onto the calendar because of this new Justice Kavanaugh.
Well, I think that there is a good chance we will see at least one of them be granted, maybe 2. That might be going a bit far. But look, the fact that the justices now have a full complement of 9, and the fact that Justice Kavanaugh, who most people think will be a reliable conservative vote, particularly on issues like these cases that implicate religion, I think a lot of us court observers are excited to see what might happen. Because as you know, the Supreme Court gets to pick and choose which cases it wants to hear. I think they might have been a little hesitant in the past to take on some religious cases just given the composition of the court, but now with Justice Kavanaugh added to the court, it'll be very interesting to see if they do want to add these religion cases to their docket.
Yeah, and we usually, Ian, don't find out exactly how they vote, but do you think he'll put some of these over the top?
I mean, I think it's a good question. So, like, there's a lot of speculation that given the acrimony in the Kavanaugh hearings that Chief Justice Roberts wants to keep things calm. Now, it only takes 4 votes to grant a case, so Kavanaugh plus the other 3 most conservative justices can decide to go over Roberts' head and take these cases if they want. I don't know if they will. I think it's more likely they take the Cross case. That's an issue that comes up very often, and the doctrine in that space is frankly completely incoherent.
Okay. I want to try to get through both. So let's start with we'll start with the cross case. So this is this large cross that was a World War I memorial. I believe it went up in 1925. At some point, the State Park Commission got involved in 1961. So now there's government money that goes to a little bit of maintaining this. The Fourth Circuit ruling against it said one simply cannot ignore the fact that for thousands of years, the Latin cross has represented Christianity, even in the memorial context. A Latin cross serves not simply as a generic symbol of death, but rather a Christian symbol of the death of Jesus Christ. So, Tom, they said, government can't be tangled up with that.
That's what they said. And look, the Fourth Circuit, like a lot of courts that have decided these issues, was very heavily split right down the middle. And look, the fact is the law in this area is a bit of a jumble. And you see courts wrestling with these types of cases, public monuments, crosses, that sorts of thing. And what they have to look at is whether there's a historic purpose behind it, whether the monument has existed for many years without challenge, which might suggest maybe it does have more of a secular purpose to it. But the bottom line is the law is not clear in this area. That's why we saw the lower court in this case split. That's why this case might be a particularly attractive one to the Supreme Court, so they can grant review, articulate the law in a coherent way.
Okay, so they went to the full Fourth Circuit and asked them to rehear the case. They said no. One of the dissenting judges said this: it needlessly puts at risk hundreds of monuments with similar symbols standing on public grounds across the country, such as those in nearby Arlington National Cemetery, where crosses of comparable size stand in commemoration of fallen soldiers. So, Ian, what do they do with that?
Yeah, I mean, Arlington Cemetery, I think, is different because you have many monuments there. And, like, if you ever walk through Arlington Cemetery, like, sometimes you'll see a crescent moon because the person is a Muslim. Sometimes you'll see a Star of David because the person was a Jew. So often courts will look to, if there's a single monument that memorializes a single religion, that's more likely to get struck down. Now, that was more likely to get struck down under the court as it used to exist. I think that if they take this case, there's almost certainly 5 votes to say that this cross can stay.
Okay, and I want to get you both quickly to weigh in on the case involving the football coach out in the state of Washington. He was praying after games. Now, he started doing this in 2008. There were no complaints. Actually, when there was a compliment paid to the school system in 2015, they said, whoa, 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 what is this coach doing? They sent him a letter warning him that it was going to look like a government endorsement because he had a captive audience with these young players and that kind of thing. This has gone to a vote. So quickly, both of you, how do you think this turns out?
Yeah, you know, I think if this court takes it, I think that they're going to uphold the teacher's right to do this. The Supreme Court has said time and again that students and teachers don't check their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse door. And the way that this teacher was handling the prayer, he would typically, at least initially, go out midfield, kneel down by himself, say a prayer. It doesn't have that sort of heavy-handed, compelling endorsement of religion that you've seen in some cases where courts say it's gone too far.
Ian, he lost in the lower court.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably not going to take this case. If they do, I would actually bet that they rule against the coach. And the reason why is ultimately this is about a principal telling an employee that he can't say something. I actually used to be a school teacher, and there's lots of things you can't say as a school teacher. Didn't violate my First Amendment right to say that I couldn't curse in front of children, or I couldn't say Hail Satan in front of children. Like, there's just lots of things you can't say as a school teacher. And I don't know a way legally to separate this case from some of those more ridiculous examples.
All right, Ian and Tom, you've both had caffeine tonight. We may find out Monday what the court decides.
It's fun stuff.
Thank you both.
Your Holiness. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'm very happy.
This is the cordial greeting between Pope Francis and Karakin II, the Supreme Patriarch and Catholicos of all Armenians. They spent a few minutes in private demonstrating once again the good understanding between the Catholic Church and the Armenian Apostolic Church. After the traditional exchange of gifts came the photographs. Then the two said farewell in a very affectionate way. The last time Pope Francis met with Karakin II was in April. He was in the Vatican Gardens for the inauguration of this statue of St. Gregory of Narek, declared a Doctor of the Church by Pope Francis in 2015. After 25 days of work and exchanging of opinions between 260 bishops from all continents, Pope Francis closes the Synod on Youth and Vocation on Sunday. The Synod challenge was daunting. The bishops should find ways to help young people get involved in Catholicism and make life-changing decisions for their lives, such as marriage, religious life, priesthood, or lay celibacy. One of the many fruits of the Synod is a document with reflections the bishops have proposed to the Pope. It's a rich text that will ask the Church to take a listening attitude toward young people. It also proposes a more Synod-like style of hierarchy in the Catholic Church. This document is not the only fruit from the Synod to prevent what the Pope said at the inauguration.
Impegniamoci dunque nel cercare di frequentare il futuro e di far uscire da questo sinodo non solo un documento che generalmente viene letto da pochi e criticato da molti, ma soprattutto propositi pastorali concreti in grado di realizzare il compito del Sinodo stesso.
Instead of concrete indications, the Synod is presenting a new active and welcoming attitude toward young people. It's evident both in language and in actions. The idea of the Synod is that youth are not only the future of the Church, but rather the present.